There are red flags. And then there's this. My mother-in-law didn't just cross boundaries. She bulldozed through them, set them on fire, and then acted like I was the problem for noticing. This is the story of how she tried to take over my baby's life, convinced herself she was the real mother, and forced me to do something I never thought I'd have to do: get a restraining order against my own family. My name's Sarah. I'm 32. My husband Mark is 34. We've been together for 6 years, married for 3. Mark's an only child, and his dad passed away when he was in college, so it's always been just him and his mom, Linda. She's 61, retired teacher, lives about 20 minutes away from us in a small house she's owned for 30 years. For most of our relationship, Linda was fine. A little intense, a little overbearing, but nothing I couldn't handle. She'd call Mark multiple times a day, sometimes 4 or 5 times, just to check in or ask what he was doing. She'd drop by our apartment unannounced on weekends, sometimes bringing groceries we didn't ask for, sometimes just stopping by to say hello. She'd make comments about how I did things, how I cooked chicken, how I folded towels, how I organized our pantry, but I let it slide. She was lonely. Her husband had been gone for over a decade. Mark was all she had. I got it. Everything changed the day I got pregnant. We'd been trying for about 6 months, not stressing about it, just letting things happen naturally. When I saw those 2 pink lines on the test, I cried. Happy tears. Mark cried too. We waited until 12 weeks to tell anyone, standard practice just in case. We told my parents first, over dinner at their house. They were thrilled. Hugs, congratulations. My mom immediately started planning baby showers. Normal, healthy excitement. The next day, we went to Linda's house to tell her. We sat her down in her living room and Mark said, "Mom, we have some news. Sarah's pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother." I expected tears. I expected excitement. What I didn't expect was what happened next. Linda's face went white, then red. Then she started sobbing. Not happy crying, but this deep, guttural sobbing like she'd been waiting her entire life for this moment, and it was finally here. She grabbed Mark's face with both hands and said, "My baby is having a baby. My baby is having my baby." I laughed awkwardly. Mark hugged her, but something about the way she said it, "my baby," made my stomach twist. She turned to me, still crying, and said, "Thank you. Thank you for giving this to me. Not congratulations. Not, I'm so happy for you both. Thank you for giving this to me." Over the next few weeks, Linda became obsessed. She texted me every single morning at 7 a.m. "How are you feeling? Any nausea? Are you eating enough? Are you taking your vitamins?" At first, I thought it was sweet. I'd reply with updates, but then it became constant. She'd text me at lunch. "Did you eat protein? You need protein." At dinner, "Are you resting? You shouldn't be on your feet too much." Before bed, "Make sure you're sleeping on your left side. It's better for the baby." When I didn't respond immediately, she'd call Mark. "Why isn't Sarah answering me? Is she okay? Is the baby okay?" Mark would call me, confused. "Did something happen? My mom's freaking out." I'd have to text her back just to stop the spiral. It was exhausting. At 16 weeks, we had a routine ultrasound. Everything was fine. Healthy baby, normal development. We didn't find out the gender yet. We wanted to wait. When we got home, Linda was sitting on our front porch. She said, "I couldn't wait to hear how the appointment went." Mark said, "Mom, how did you know we had an appointment today?" She smiled and said, "You mentioned it last week." He hadn't. I know because I keep a calendar, and I specifically remember him saying we weren't going to tell her about every appointment because she'd want to come to all of them. But she knew. Later, I found out she'd called my OB's office pretending to be me and asked when my next appointment was. When I confronted her, she said, "I was just trying to be involved. You're making a big deal out of nothing." At 20 weeks, we found out we were having a girl. We told Linda over the phone. She screamed. Literally screamed with joy. Then she said, "I'm coming over right now. We need to start planning the nursery." She showed up 30 minutes later with bags from Target, pink blankets, pink onesies, pink everything. She'd spent over $300. She laid everything out on our couch and started talking about themes. I think we should do butterflies, or maybe princesses. What do you think, Mark? I said, Linda, this is really generous, but we haven't decided on a theme yet. She looked at me like I'd slapped her. She said, Well, I'm just trying to help. I said, I know, and I appreciate it, but Mark and I want to pick things out together. She turned to Mark. You don't mind, do you? He looked uncomfortable. He said, Mom, Sarah's right. We'll figure it out. Linda's face fell. She said, Fine, I'll just return everything. She gathered up all the bags and left without saying goodbye. That night, she called Mark crying. She said I was being controlling, that I was shutting her out, that she just wanted to be a good grandmother. Mark told her we appreciated her excitement, but we needed space to make our own decisions. She said, I'm sorry, I'll back off. She didn't. At 24 weeks, Linda bought a crib for her house. She sent Mark a photo of it assembled in her guest bedroom. The text said, All ready for when my baby girl comes to visit Grandma. Mark called her. He said, Mom, she's not even born yet. Why do you have a crib? Linda said. So she can stay over whenever I want. I'm going to take her on weekends so you two can have a break. Mark said, We haven't even talked about that. Linda said, Well, I'm talking about it. I'm her grandmother. I have a right to spend time with her. Mark said, You're not entitled to overnights, Mom. She hung up on him. Then she sent me a text. I don't know what you've done to my son, but he never used to be this cold. I showed Mark the text. He was furious. He called her back and told her if she ever sent me a message like that again, we'd go no contact. She apologized, but it didn't feel genuine. It felt like she was just saying what she needed to say to smooth things over. At 30 weeks, Linda started referring to the baby as my baby, constantly. Not the baby. Not your baby. My baby. She'd post on Facebook, Can't wait to meet my baby girl. Only 2 more months until my baby is here. People in the comments would say things like, I didn't know you were pregnant. And she'd reply, Oh, it's my granddaughter, but she's my baby. My own friends started texting me, asking if Linda was okay. I didn't know what to say. Mark confronted her. He said, Mom, you need to stop calling her your baby. She's our baby. You're the grandmother. Linda cried. She said, I didn't mean it like that. You're being so sensitive. Then came the birth. I went into labor at 39 weeks and 2 days. It was a Tuesday, around 4 a.m. Contractions started, and by 7 a.m. they were strong enough that we headed to the hospital. We called my parents on the way. My mom said, We'll be there soon. Let us know if you need anything. We called Linda. She answered on the first ring. Mark said, Mom, Sarah's in labor. We're heading to the hospital. She said, I'm coming right now. We got to the hospital, checked in, got settled in a labor and delivery room. My parents showed up around 9 a.m. They poked their heads in, asked how I was doing, said they'd wait in the waiting room and to let them know if we needed anything. Respectful, patient, supportive from a distance. Linda showed up at 9:30. She didn't go to the waiting room. She came straight to my room. She knocked once and walked in without waiting for an answer. I was in the middle of a contraction, gripping Mark's hand, breathing through it. She walked right up to the bed and said, How's my baby doing? Mark said, Mom, you can't be in here right now. She said, Why not? I'm family. Mark said, Sarah's in labor. She needs space. Linda looked offended. She said, I'm not in the way. I just want to be here for the birth of my grandchild. I finished the contraction and said, as calmly as I could, Linda, I appreciate you coming, but I need you to wait outside. This is really personal and I'm not comfortable with you being in here. She stared at me. Then she said, I was there when Mark was born. I know what labor looks like. I can help. I said, I don't want help. I want privacy. She looked at Mark like she expected him to defend her. He didn't. He said, Mom, please go to the waiting room. We'll let you know when the baby's here. Linda's eyes filled with tears. She said, You're shutting me out of the most important moment of my life. Then she left. I labored for another 6 hours. It was long, exhausting, painful, but Mark was incredible. My doctor was amazing. At 3:47 p.m., our daughter Emma was born. 7 pounds, 3 ounces. Healthy, perfect, beautiful. They placed her on my chest and I sobbed. Mark sobbed. It was the most overwhelming, perfect moment of my entire life. For the first hour, it was just the three of us, skin-to-skin contact, quiet, peaceful. The nurses took Emma to weigh her and clean her up, then brought her back and we just stared at her. Mark said, "We made that." I said, "We made that." Then the nurse said we could have visitors if we wanted. I said, "Can you bring my parents in first?" They came in, and it was perfect. My mom cried happy tears. My dad held Emma for maybe 3 minutes, took one photo, and handed her back. My mom said, "We're so proud of you. She's beautiful. We'll come back tomorrow so you can rest." And they left. Then Linda came in. She walked straight to me, didn't say a word, and took Emma from my arms. Didn't ask. Just took her. She sat down in the chair by the window and started crying, rocking Emma, whispering to her, "My baby, my sweet, precious baby. I've waited so long for you." I was too exhausted to process it at first. I just watched her. Then she looked at me and said, "Thank you for carrying her for me." I blinked. I said, "What?" She said, "Thank you for this gift, for giving me this." Mark said, "Mom, that's a really weird thing to say." She laughed and said, "Oh, you know what I mean." But I didn't, and it made my skin crawl. She stayed for over 3 hours. She held Emma almost the entire time. When I asked for her back so I could try breastfeeding, Linda said, "Can't you just give her a bottle? Then I can feed her too." I said, "I'm breastfeeding." She said, "Well, that's inconvenient for everyone else." The nurse finally came in and said visiting hours were over. Linda asked if she could stay the night. The nurse said no. Linda looked at me and said, "Can you tell them I'm allowed? I'm her grandmother." I said, "Linda, I need to rest. You need to go home." She looked hurt, but she left. Before she did, she kissed Emma on the forehead about 15 times and whispered, "Grandma loves you so much, my angel. I'll see you so soon." The next morning, Linda showed up at 6:45 a.m. I'd gotten maybe 90 minutes of sleep total. Emma had been up every hour and a half trying to figure out breastfeeding. I was in pain, bleeding heavily, exhausted beyond anything I'd ever experienced. The nurses had been coming in every few hours to check my vitals, help with feeding, change my pads. It was overwhelming and intimate, and I felt completely vulnerable. Linda walked in with balloons, a teddy bear the size of a toddler, and 3 bags of stuff from the hospital gift shop. She didn't knock. She just walked in. Mark was asleep in the chair next to my bed. Emma was finally sleeping in her bassinet. And Linda's entrance woke both of them up. Emma started crying immediately. I started crying because I was so tired I didn't have the capacity to deal with this. Linda rushed over to the bassinet and picked Emma up before I could even sit up fully. She said, "Oh, my sweet girl, did you miss Grandma? Grandma's here now." I said, my voice hoarse, "Linda, she just fell asleep. Please don't wake her." Linda ignored me. She started bouncing Emma, but Emma was screaming now because she was hungry and didn't recognize the person holding her. Linda said, "She's just fussy. She needs her grandma." Mark woke up fully and saw what was happening. He stood up and said, "Mom, what are you doing here so early?" She said, "I wanted to be here when my baby woke up." He said, "She's not your baby, and visiting hours don't even start until 8. Linda's face hardened. She said, "I'm not a visitor. I'm family." I said, "Linda, please give me Emma. She needs to eat." Linda looked at me and said, "Where's a bottle? I can feed her." I said, "I'm breastfeeding. I told you that." She said, "Well, maybe you should reconsider. It's not fair that only you get to feed her." Mark walked over and took Emma from Linda's arms. He handed her to me. Linda looked shocked, like she couldn't believe he'd just done that. She said, "Mark, I'm just trying to help." He said, "This isn't helping. You need to leave. We'll call you later." Linda's eyes filled with tears. She said, "I drove all the way here. I brought gifts. I just want to spend time with my granddaughter." Mark said, "And you will. But not right now. Sarah needs rest and Emma needs to eat. Please go." Linda looked at me like I was the villain in all of this. She said, "You've turned him against me." I didn't even have the energy to respond. I just started nursing Emma while Linda stood there watching me with this tight, angry expression. Finally, she grabbed her purse and left without another word. The moment she was gone, I broke down sobbing. Mark held me while I cried and said, "I'm so sorry. I should have taken her key away months ago. This is going to stop." We stayed in the hospital one more night. Linda didn't come back, but she texted Mark 37 times. I know because he showed me. "Is Emma okay? Can I come see her? Why are you keeping me away? I'm her grandmother. I have rights. You're being cruel. Sarah is controlling you. I raised you better than this." On and on and on. When we were discharged and came home, I felt a brief moment of relief. Finally, we'd have privacy. We'd be able to bond as a family without interruptions. I was so wrong. We walked into our apartment at around 2 p.m. Mark helped me inside, got me settled on the couch with pillows and blankets. Emma was asleep in her car seat. I was about to transfer her to the bassinet we'd set up in the living room when I heard a noise from the kitchen. Linda walked out. She was in our apartment. She'd let herself in with the spare key Mark had given her months ago, the one that was supposed to be for emergencies only. She was holding a casserole dish. She smiled and said, "Surprise! I made you dinner. I figured you'd be too tired to cook." I stared at her. Mark said, "Mom, how did you get in here?" She said, "I used my key. I wanted to help." He said, "You can't just let yourself into our home. You need to call first." She looked hurt. She said, "I thought you'd be happy." "I made your favorite, chicken and rice casserole." Mark walked over and held out his hand. He said, "Give me the key." Linda pulled back. She said, "What?" He said, "The spare key. Give it to me. You don't get to just walk into our home whenever you want." Linda's face went red. She said, "I'm your mother." He said, "And this is my home. Give me the key." She reached into her purse, pulled out the key, and slammed it into his hand. Then she said, "Fine, I see how it is. I try to help, and this is how you treat me." I was sitting on the couch, still recovering from birth, holding my newborn, and watching this unfold like a nightmare. Linda turned to me and said, "This is your doing. You've poisoned him against me. Before you, he would never have treated me this way." I said, my voice shaking, "Linda, I haven't poisoned anyone. We just need boundaries. You can't come into our home unannounced. You can't take our baby without asking. You can't ignore what we're telling you." She said, "I wasn't taking her. I was holding her. I'm her grandmother. That's what grandmothers do." I said, "Grandmothers ask first. Grandmothers respect the parents' wishes. You're not doing that." Linda stared at me for a long, cold moment. Then she said, "You're going to regret this. One day, you're going to need me, and I won't be there." She grabbed her purse and walked out, leaving the casserole dish on the counter. Mark locked the door behind her. Then he came over and sat next to me. We didn't say anything. We just sat there in silence, both of us realizing that this wasn't going to get better on its own. For the next 2 weeks, Linda left us alone. No texts, no calls, no unannounced visits. I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd finally gotten the message. But then I started noticing her car. She'd drive by our apartment building, slowly, multiple times a day. I'd be looking out the window and I'd see her silver Honda Accord creeping past. She never stopped. She never got out. She just watched. Mark called her and asked her to stop. She denied it at first. Then she said, "I'm allowed to drive on public streets. It's a free country." He said, "Mom, you're driving by our building 5 times a day. That's not normal." She said, "I just want to make sure you're okay." He said, "We're fine. Stop driving by." She hung up. A few days later, I took Emma to the grocery store for the first time. It was a big deal for me. First time leaving the house with her alone. First time managing the car seat and the stroller and the diaper bag all by myself. I was anxious, but determined. I got to the store, parked, got Emma into the stroller, and walked inside. I was in the produce section when I heard, "Oh my God, is that my baby?" I turned around. Linda was standing there with a shopping cart, smiling like she'd just run into an old friend. She rushed over and reached for Emma in the stroller. I stepped in front of her and said, "Linda, what are you doing here?" She said, "I was just shopping. What a coincidence." It wasn't. This wasn't her usual grocery store. She lived 20 minutes away, and there were 3 closer stores to her house. She'd followed me. I said, "This isn't a coincidence. You need to leave us alone." She looked shocked. She said, "I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just shopping." I said, "You're following me. You're driving by our apartment. You're stalking us." People were starting to stare. Linda's face went red. She said loudly, "I am not stalking you. You're being paranoid." I turned around and walked away. She followed me. She kept talking, saying I was overreacting, that she just wanted to see her granddaughter, that I was being cruel. I went to the checkout, paid as fast as I could, and left. She followed me to the parking lot. I loaded Emma into the car, got in, and locked the doors. Linda stood outside my car window, knocking on the glass, saying, "Please, Sarah, just let me hold her for a minute." I started the car and drove away. She was still standing there in the parking lot, watching me leave. When I got home, I called Mark, sobbing. He left work early. We sat down and made a list of every incident, every boundary violation, every time she'd shown up uninvited, every time she'd ignored our requests. The list was 2 pages long. That's when we decided to look into legal options. Mark didn't want to. He kept saying, "She's just lonely. She doesn't mean any harm." But I said, "She tried to follow me in a grocery store. She's driving by our apartment multiple times a day. She let herself into our home without permission. This isn't loneliness. This is obsession." We had a consultation with a family lawyer. She listened to everything, reviewed the list, looked at text messages and Facebook posts where Linda referred to Emma as "my baby." The lawyer said, "This is textbook harassment. You could file for a restraining order, but I'm going to be honest. It's hard to get one unless there's a direct threat or an incident that involves the child's safety." 2 weeks later, we got that incident. I'd gone back to work part-time. Emma was 8 weeks old. We'd enrolled her in a small, highly rated daycare 3 blocks from my office. It had great reviews, trained staff, cameras in every room. We felt safe. Mark and I were the only people listed as authorized pickup contacts. We'd made that very, very clear with the director during the intake meeting. I even said, "My mother-in-law is not allowed to pick her up under any circumstances. If she shows up, do not let her take my daughter." The director made a note in the file and said, "Understood. We take security very seriously." On a Thursday afternoon, I was in a meeting at work when my phone started buzzing. I ignored it. It was a client call. I couldn't step out. But it kept buzzing. 5 calls in a row. I excused myself and checked. 3 missed calls from the daycare. 2 from Mark. My stomach dropped. I called the daycare back immediately. The director answered. She said, "Sarah, I'm so glad you called. I need to let you know about an incident that happened about 30 minutes ago." I felt like I couldn't breathe. I said, "Is Emma okay?" She said, "Emma is fine. She's safe. But a woman came in claiming to be Emma's grandmother and tried to take her." I sat down on the floor in the hallway outside the conference room. I said, "What?" The director continued. "A woman named Linda came to the front desk around 1:15. She said she was here to pick up Emma. She said you'd called her and asked her to get the baby because you were stuck at work and couldn't make it. She seemed very confident, very convincing." I said, "I never called her. I would never ask her to pick up Emma." The director said, "I know. We asked her for ID. Then we checked our authorized pickup list. Her name wasn't on it. We told her we couldn't release Emma to her without your written permission. She got very upset. She raised her voice. She said, 'That's my granddaughter. I have every right to take her. Her mother is being unreasonable.'" I was shaking. The director said, "We remained firm. We told her that without authorization we could not let her take Emma, and that if she didn't leave, we'd call the police." She finally left, but she was very angry. She kept saying this wasn't over. "I wanted to make sure you were aware. We've added a note to Emma's file flagging Linda as a non-authorized person. If she shows up again, we'll call the police immediately." I thanked her, hung up, and called Mark. He was already on his way to the daycare. I left work, got in my car, and drove there as fast as I could. When I arrived, Mark was in the director's office. I went straight to Emma's room. She was napping, completely unaware of what had almost happened. I picked her up and just held her, crying. Mark came in a few minutes later. His face was pale. He said, "My mom tried to take our daughter." I said, "I know." He said, "What if they'd let her? What if the daycare hadn't checked? Where would she have gone?" That question haunted both of us. Mark called Linda from the daycare parking lot. She answered like nothing was wrong. He said, "Did you try to pick up Emma from daycare today?" She said, calm as anything, "Yes, I thought I'd help out. I figured you were both busy." Mark said, "You're not authorized to pick her up. You can't just take our baby." Linda said, "She's my granddaughter. I should be able to see her whenever I want." Mark said, "No, you tried to take her without our permission. That's kidnapping." She laughed, actually laughed. She said, "Don't be ridiculous. You're being dramatic." Mark said, "If you ever try that again, I'm calling the police." She said, "You wouldn't dare." He said, "Try me," and hung up. 10 minutes later, I got a text from Linda. It said, "You've brainwashed my son. You're keeping my baby from me. You're a terrible mother and you don't deserve her. This isn't over." I took a screenshot. Then I showed it to Mark. He stared at it for a long time. Then he said, "We're getting a restraining order." We went back to the lawyer the next day. We showed her everything: the daycare incident, the threatening text, the stalking, the unauthorized entry into our home, all of it. She said, "This is more than enough. I'll file the paperwork today." We filed for a temporary restraining order that Friday. We had a court hearing scheduled for the following Wednesday. Linda was served with the papers on Saturday. She called Mark 17 times. He didn't answer. She sent 34 text messages. He didn't respond. She showed up at our apartment building on Sunday. We called the police. They escorted her away and told her she'd be arrested if she came back. The court hearing was brutal. We sat on one side of the courtroom. Linda sat on the other with a lawyer she'd hired. When it was her turn to speak, she cried. She told the judge I was manipulative, controlling, and keeping her from her only grandchild. She said she'd never done anything wrong, that she was just a loving grandmother, that we were overreacting to normal grandparent behavior. Then it was our turn. Our lawyer presented the evidence. Text messages where Linda called Emma "my baby" over and over. Photos of Linda's Facebook posts claiming Emma as hers. A sworn statement from the daycare director detailing the attempted pickup. My log of incidents. Every time Linda had shown up uninvited. Every time she'd violated a boundary. Every time she'd ignored our requests. The threatening text message. The judge reviewed everything in silence. Then he looked at Linda and said, "Mrs. Carter, your behavior goes beyond enthusiasm. It constitutes harassment. The daycare incident is particularly concerning. You attempted to remove a child from a facility without authorization from the legal guardians. That is a serious matter." Linda started crying again. She said, "I just love her so much." The judge said, "Love does not entitle you to violate boundaries or disregard the wishes of this child's parents. I'm granting a restraining order. You are to have no contact with Sarah, Mark, or the minor child Emma for a period of 12 months. If you violate this order, you will be arrested and face criminal charges. Do you understand?" Linda sobbed. She looked at Mark and said, "How could you do this to your own mother?" Mark didn't say anything. His hands were shaking. We left the courthouse. Linda tried to follow us to the parking lot. A bailiff stopped her and reminded her the order was effective immediately. She stood there, 50 feet away, crying and watching us load Emma into the car. That was 6 months ago. Emma is 10 months old now. We haven't heard from Linda since the restraining order. Well, that's not entirely true. She sent one letter, not to us, but to my parents. My mom called and said, "Linda sent us something. Do you want me to read it?" I said yes. My mom read it over the phone. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I'm writing to you because I'm not allowed to contact Sarah or Mark directly. I want you to know how sorry I am for everything that's happened. I never meant to cause any harm. I was so excited about becoming a grandmother that I lost sight of what was appropriate. I see that now. I've been in therapy for the past 4 months, working through why I became so obsessed with Emma. My therapist has helped me understand that after losing my husband, and with Mark being my only child, I was terrified of being alone. When Emma was born, I saw her as a second chance, a chance to be needed again, to matter to someone. But I understand now that I was trying to fill a void in my own life at the expense of my son and his family. That was wrong. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect a response. I just wanted you to know that I'm working on myself, and I hope that someday, when I've proven I can respect boundaries, Mark and Sarah might give me a chance to be a grandmother. The right kind of grandmother. If not, I'll understand. Please tell them I love them, and I love Emma, even though I showed it in the worst possible way. Sincerely, Linda. My mom finished reading and waited. I didn't say anything for a long time. Then I said, "What do you think?" My mom said carefully, "I think she sounds sincere, but I also think words are easy. Actions are what matter, and her actions were terrifying." I agreed. I told my mom not to respond. I said, "If Linda wants to prove she's changed, she can respect the restraining order and leave us alone for the full 12 months. Then maybe we'll consider supervised contact. But I'm not opening that door until I'm absolutely sure Emma will be safe." Mark read the letter too. He cried. He said, "Part of me wants to believe her. Part of me wants my mom back." I said, "I know, but the mom you want back isn't the mom who tried to take our daughter from daycare. You can want her to change. You can hope she gets help, but you can't let hope override your responsibility to protect Emma." He nodded. He said, "You're right." And we didn't respond to the letter. A month after that, Linda tried one more time. She sent a package to our apartment. It was addressed to Emma. Inside was a stuffed bunny, a children's book, and a card. The card said, "To my sweet Emma, Grandma thinks about you every day. I hope you're happy and healthy. I love you more than words can say." There was no return address. We debated what to do. Mark wanted to keep the bunny. It was soft, harmless, clearly bought with good intentions. I said, "She's not supposed to contact us. This is a violation of the restraining order." Mark said, "She sent it to Emma, not to us." I said, "Emma is 10 months old. She doesn't know the difference. Linda sent this to make us feel guilty, to keep herself in our minds, to test whether we'd let it slide." We contacted our lawyer. She said, "Technically, any contact, direct or indirect, is a violation. You could report it, but judges don't usually take action on something this minor unless there's a pattern." We decided not to report it, but we didn't keep the bunny. We donated it. And we documented the incident in case there were more. There haven't been. It's been 5 months since the package. The restraining order expires in 6 more months. Mark and I have talked about what happens after that. Do we try to rebuild a relationship with Linda? Do we allow supervised visits? Do we extend the restraining order? We don't have answers yet. What we do know is this. If and when we allow Linda back into our lives, it will be on our terms, not hers. It will be supervised. It will be slow. And the first time she crosses a boundary, she's gone. Permanently. Emma is thriving. She's crawling now, babbling, laughing at everything. She has no idea what happened. She'll never remember the hospital, the daycare, the restraining order. To her, her grandmothers are my mom and Mark's mom figure, my aunt, who stepped in and been the kind of loving, respectful grandmother every child deserves. Mark is healing. Therapy has helped him process the grief of losing his mom, not to death, but to her own actions. He's learning that it's okay to love someone and also protect yourself from them, that you can hope someone changes while refusing to be their victim. I've healed too. The postpartum period was hard enough without the added stress of Linda's behavior. For months, I had nightmares about the daycare incident, about what would have happened if they'd let her take Emma. I imagined Linda driving away with my baby, convinced she was doing the right thing, and me never seeing Emma again. It took therapy and time to stop catastrophizing, to accept that Emma is safe, that we did the right thing, and we did. I know some people will say we overreacted, that we should have given her more chances. That family is family, and we should have worked it out privately. But here's the truth. We gave her chances. So many chances. We set boundaries. We communicated clearly. We asked her to stop. We begged her to respect our wishes. She ignored all of it. She escalated. And when she tried to take our child from daycare without permission, she crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. This wasn't about punishment. It was about protection. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Here's what I want you to take away from this story. Boundaries are not suggestions. When someone repeatedly violates them, especially when a child's safety is involved, you are not required to keep giving chances. You are not required to prioritize someone else's feelings over your child's well-being. And you are not the bad guy for protecting your family, even if the threat comes from within that family. Linda will always be Emma's biological grandmother. That's a fact. But being a grandmother is more than biology. It's about respect, trust, and putting the child's needs above your own. Linda couldn't do that. And until she can, if she ever can, she doesn't get access to my daughter. So here's my question for you. If your mother-in-law tried to take your baby from daycare without permission, would you have gotten a restraining order, or would you have handled it differently? Drop your verdict, NTA, YTA, ESH, or NAH, because I know this one is going to be divisive. I know some of you will think I'm too harsh, that I should have tried family therapy first, or mediation, or just blocked her number and moved on. But I want you to really think about it. If someone, anyone, family or not, tried to take your child from a daycare, what would you do? How far would you go to make sure it never happened again? I went as far as I needed to, and I'd do it again. Thanks for sticking with this one. I know it's long, I know it's heavy, but these stories matter, because too many people stay silent when family crosses the line. Too many people excuse toxic behavior because they mean well, or that's just how they are. And too many children grow up in environments where boundaries don't exist because the adults were too afraid to enforce them. Don't be that adult. Protect your kids. Set your boundaries. And if someone can't respect them, show them the door. Even if that someone is family. Especially if that someone is family. Next episode, we're switching gears completely. A cheating story with a twist you won't see coming. But until then, remember, love without respect is just control wearing a disguise, and you don't owe anyone access to your child just because they share DNA. Trust your instincts, protect your family, and never, ever apologize for putting your child's safety first. Until next time.